We've all been there. You go to a site and it's slow or unresponsive. You eventually give up and go to another site. It's a horrible user experience that makes you think twice about even going back to that site. Did you know that a site's performance issues can result in more than just a bad user experience? It affects Google's search rankings and can have financial impacts as well. Performance is a big deal, so today I'm going to give you some reasons why you should care about web page performance and talk about 4 principles you can use to help get you started in your focus on web page performance. Hi, I'm Phil Sparks with Guidant Digital. I spent 20 years working in a large enterprise IT shop, and during that time, my fondest memories come from a time when I was a lead programmer on a web development team. I loved being able to mentor other developers and help them grow in that role. And so that's the primary driver of my Guidant Digital business and this channel. I want to come alongside web developers, marketers, and small business owners and help you guys grow in your marketing and web development skills. So if this interests you, subscribe below to stay informed about future content. This is the first video in a series I'm going to do about web page performance. In this series, I'll give you tips on performance, including information about JavaScript performance and image optimization. We'll cover the tools available for you to evaluate web performance, and I'll talk about how you can put things in place to continually monitor performance. In today's video, I want to introduce the topic of web performance by talking about why it is so important, and then give you 4 principles that will help you get started in tackling web performance. So why should you care about web performance? Let me give you 4 reasons. The first reason is that it affects SEO. Google uses it as a ranking signal. This isn't anything new. Google has been using page speed as a ranking signal for desktop searches since 2010. What is fairly recent though is that starting in July of 2018, performance is also used as a ranking signal for mobile searches. So does this mean if you have a fast site that you'll automatically jump to the top of the search results? No, not necessarily. Relevancy, or how closely your content matches the searcher's intent, is still a really strong ranking signal. And so if your competitor's slow page is more relevant to what the user is searching for, then it still might rank above your really fast page. Where it comes to play, in my opinion, is among highly competitive search terms. If everything else is equal and a user is searching for a term that is highly competitive, having a site that has good performance metrics can help you rank above competing content that has poor performance metrics. The second benefit to focusing on web page performance is related to SEO. A focus on optimizing performance will also help you optimize your crawling budget. When Google crawls your site, it allocates a crawl budget to your site. This crawl budget is determined by the crawl demand and crawl rate limit. Crawl demand is based on the popularity of your pages, and so Google will crawl more popular pages more often. Crawl rate limit is the rate that Google determines that it can safely crawl your site and not disrupt normal usage. Putting these together, and you've got a finite crawl budget assigned to your site. For smaller sites that are less than 1,000 pages, this won't normally be an issue, but for larger sites, you want to manage that crawl budget wisely. One of the ways you can help manage this budget is to have fast pages. By having fast pages, Google will be able to crawl more pages each time that it crawls your site, and you can get your content updated in Google's index faster. The third reason page speed matters is that it affects conversions and bounce rates. According to Kissmetrics, 47% of consumers expect a page to load in 2 seconds or less, and 40% of consumers will abandon a site if it takes more than 3 seconds to load. Man, we are impatient people. Another study by Google concluded that as mobile page load speed goes from 1 second to 3 seconds, the probability that the user will abandon the site increases by 32%. An increase from 1 second to 10 seconds increases the probability the user will abandon the site by 123%. These bounces are missed opportunities for you to get people to your content. For those of you that are running e-commerce sites, this means missed sales and impacts to your bottom line. According to Amazon, they've concluded that they would lose $1.6 billion, that's billion with a B, if their page speed increased by just 1 second. So I get it, most of us, actually none of us, are running at Amazon scale, but it does make an impact no matter what our size. There are case studies after case studies that show that page speed directly correlates to bounce rates and conversions. And so if you are not focused on performance, you are missing out on opportunities. The last reason you need to focus on performance is because of your brand's reputation. Like a lot of things in life, your first impression is critical. According to a study by Kissmetrics, 79% of online shoppers say they won't go back to a website if they've had trouble with load speed. So not only do you have people abandoning your site and you missing out on conversion because of bad performance, you also have users not even coming back to your site. Studies have also shown that slow performance affects the user perception about other areas of our website and brand. I read about a study from Radware that I thought was really interesting. It illustrated how slow performance can damage your brand. In their study, they presented the same sites to 2 different groups. The first group navigated the sites at normal speeds, and the second group navigated the site with a 500 millisecond speed delay. So just half a second of a delay. When asked to describe their experience, the group that was given the slower site was 3 times as likely to use negative adjectives. The interesting thing to me about the study was that their frustration with the slower speed bled over into other areas like design and content. They used words like tacky, boring, confusing, and childlike to describe the slower version of the site, things that would seem to be totally unrelated to performance. There are even studies that find that slow performance influences users' impression of your organization. A study by Customer Research Lab found that 66% of users say that website performance influenced their impression of the firm. Now that I've convinced you that web page speed is important and impacts you, what do you do with that knowledge? Let me give you 4 principles to start with. Principle number 1, don't forget about the real world. Google has a video on their Google Webmasters YouTube channel that talks about what SEOs need to know about site speed. They don't give away too many secrets in the video. One thing I learned from the video is that the data that they use for their performance ranking signal comes from 2 different sources. They use lab data and real field data to classify your site as really good or pretty bad. Lab data is data that comes from testing tools like Google Lighthouse or GTmetrix or Web Page Test. These tools simulate load on a web page using a standard set of hardware and network conditions. For example, Google Lighthouse says that they simulate a page load using a mid-tier device on a mobile network that is classified as a slow 4G network. Field data is data that's collected from actual users that access your site. They collect it from users that have opted in to allow Google to collect the data. If we admit it, we're probably all guilty of one time testing our site on our own computer or our own phone and see that it seems to load fast and so we call it good. Or we may enter our homepage of our site in a web testing tool like PageSpeed Insights and get a score we're satisfied with and also call it good. The problem with both of these scenarios is that we oversimplify measuring page performance. Page performance depends on a lot of factors such as whether it's a low or high-end device, the internet speed of the user, or even things like how many different applications the user has open on their computer. And so it's important that we, just like Google, take both lab and real-world data into account. Lab data that you get from most performance testing tools is a great way to identify and debug performance issues. And it's also easier to identify regression issues. But the disadvantage is that it may not give you the complete picture. This is the reason you should also review real-world field data. Another nice thing about Google Lighthouse performance tests is it also displays field data if your site has enough traffic. If you don't have access to the field data through Lighthouse, then I would recommend you make sure and know your audience. Dig into your analytics tool and make sure you know the technical profile of your users. Make sure you know what devices your users are using and how much traffic to your site is coming from desktop versus mobile. Then if you see a significant portion of your users are using low-end devices, you can make sure and account for this in your site's performance goals and testing. Principle number 2, focus on user perception. Determining page speed is not as simple as taking out a stopwatch and timing how long it takes from the time you hit enter in the browser address bar until the page is completely loaded. To illustrate this, let's take a look at 2 different scenarios for a site. For both of these scenarios, if you just look at the total page load in seconds, they both load in 5 seconds. In scenario 1, you start loading the site, and then 5 seconds later, the site loads all at once. The user is left in that 5 seconds wondering if it's working or not, and most users probably give up and abandon the site. Now let's take a look at scenario 2. You'll see that within a second, the header is displayed, and then the hero elements load within 3 seconds, and then the rest of the site within 5 seconds. Even though 5 seconds is probably still too slow for today's users, you've provided a better experience to the user by letting them know, for one, that the site is working, by giving them important hero elements early in the process. So that's why it's so important to look beyond just standard metrics like page load in seconds and look at metrics that affect the user's perception. Here are some examples of user-centric metrics from Google's Lighthouse audit that are useful to focus on. First paint, or first contentful paint. This represents the time it takes the browser to display any type of content, that can be text or images. By focusing on having a fast first contentful paint, you let the user know that something is happening. First meaningful paint. This is the time it takes for the browser to display the first meaningful content. This is probably things like the main navigation or hero content. This is the user's first opportunity to know that the content is something they will find useful and worth waiting for. And one more is time to interactive. This is the amount of time it takes for the page to be able to respond quickly to user input. Although the content might not be displayed yet, but you've now satisfied the user by allowing them to interact with the site. One interesting thing to know about this metric is that the Google Lighthouse Performance Score gives this metric a larger weight in its score than any of the other metrics. In my next video on web performance tools, I'll go deeper into how Lighthouse calculates their score. Principle number 3, focus on performance throughout your project's lifecycle. This principle applies to many things in the development process. For security, for quality, UX, and performance, the sooner you introduce it into your process, the easier it usually is to address. And so incorporate a focus on performance early in the process and into each phase. During the design process, performance should be a joint discussion between developers and designers. Developers educate the designer about the performance costs of 10 different fonts, having graphic-heavy page, or having a page full of complex animations. Designers work with developers to find the right balance between a design that will wow the user and at the same time respond fast. When you are defining overall requirements, define performance requirements. During the build process, take advantage of tools like Google Lighthouse audits that are built into the browser to test your changes before committing them. Also consider adding checks as a part of your pull request process that checks for performance regression issues. In a future video, I'll go over several methods that you can use to automate performance testing during the build process. During testing, of course, take advantage of many testing tools to evaluate and refine performance. In a future video, I'll also go over a few of the top performance tools that I would recommend. And finally, make sure that you monitor performance. Periodically scan your site, or better yet, build in checks as a part of your pull request process, like I mentioned earlier, to make sure you don't regress. Principle number 4, perfection is not the goal. This is a hard one personally for me to follow. I don't know how many hours I've wasted chasing that elusive 100 score in Google Lighthouse. It is achievable, but usually not very practical. Getting a score of 100 may require more time than it's worth or sacrificing too many features on your site. This applies to tools beyond just Google Lighthouse. Instead of trying to get their top score, set performance goals to targets that are based on your site and your users. Use the scores that each of these tools give you as a general guidance that help you identify areas that you need to focus on. In today's video, we've discussed why page speed is so important and talked about some general principles to think about relating to page speed. In future videos, we'll cover top performance related tools, go over some practical tips on improving your web page performance, and talk about ways you can get continual feedback on the performance of your site. The question of the day is, what goals have you set for web performance? Thanks for watching today. If you found this video useful, give me a like and make sure and subscribe if you want more content on web best practices. Also, feel free to leave me a comment or question below and I'll try to respond to each one. Thanks.